I know I'm late to the party once again, but I was doing exams, okay? Cut me some slack. So the second season of Bridgerton came out a while ago, and just like with the first season, everyone went insane. Bridgerton is interesting to me because it came out of nowhere, it became such an unexpected cultural phenomenon, and it has everyone and their mothers in a chokehold. And for some reason, I was not the least bit interested in it. And I'm not entirely sure why. When the first season came out, it completely passed me by. So many people were talking about it, and usually in a case like that, I would check out the show in question for myself. But I don't know, for some reason, I never felt the urge to check out Bridgerton. I think part of it may have been that I was really busy, I had other things I was watching, and by the time the world had fallen to its knees for it, I had already watched enough video essays about it that I didn't feel the need to watch the whole thing for myself. But season 2 of Bridgerton was a different story for me. I wanted to watch this thing for a couple reasons. For one thing, I wanted to see what the hype was about, and for another, nobody could shut up about Anthony Bridgerton and Kate Sharma, and I wanted to be in the know too. So over the span of a couple days, I watched season 2 of Bridgerton, and I have things to say. The first of which may not be very popular with people, but it's how I feel, so here goes. I don't love Bridgerton. Don't get me wrong, Bridgerton has its appeal. It's fun enough, it's accessible, it's an effective escapist fantasy, but I don't think I can sit here and call it a great show. The thing about Bridgerton is that it almost does the thing. It gets so close to doing what needs to be done to elevate the series, but falls just short of it, and it's greatly frustrating because of it. And this happens in almost every aspect of the show, from characters to romance arcs to subplots. Watching this show is both an enjoyable yet frustrating experience, which is pretty unique. So I want to talk about season 2 of Bridgerton, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Full disclosure before we get into this, I didn't watch the first season of this show because I couldn't be bothered to. But again, I have seen enough video essays about it to have a good grasp of what went down, and seeing as this show follows different characters each season, I didn't think it was necessary to watch the first one. So most of my opinions on Bridgerton will be influenced solely by the second season. Okay? Okay. Let's kick this thing off by talking about our leading man, Anthony Bridgerton. Anthony Bridgerton is the oldest child of the Bridgerton family, and is responsible for all of the family's affairs because of it. Anthony is a very straight-cut dude. His father died around 10-ish years ago when he was just 19 years old, which means that he had to take responsibility over his family from a very young age, since he was still a teenager. As a result of that intense pressure put on him, he's a very serious man who spends his life trying to fulfill his duty as his family's primary caretaker. Anthony is... how do I express myself without being mean? He's not very fun. Now, I don't think characters have to be fun, per se, to still be interesting to watch on screen. For example, Tommy Shelby from Peaky Blinders is one of the least fun characters I've seen in my whole life, and yet he is riveting to watch. Tommy Shelby is ruthless, he's terrifying, he's the god of Birmingham, and people know not to mess with him, and if you happen to do so, it'll likely be the last thing you ever do. This is a character archetype we've seen before, but Tommy Shelby manages to be his own thing. He never gets lost in the void of characters similar to him, because of his personal quirks and distinct traits.
Are you a whore? Because if you're not, you're in the wrong place. Bravo.
I made this hat. I was a good milliner.
It's a very pretty hat. Oh, I don't pay for suits. My suits are on the house, or the house burns down. Pass me cigarettes. Can I rip this page out?
No, you cannot rip that page out, property of the people.
No fucking fighting!
Good. Get the fuck in.
Tommy has bravado, charisma, such a distinct personality that is unique to him and differentiates him from other characters similar to him. Like, there's just something so specific about a hardened gangster who does whatever he wants, being mildly annoyed about his sister not letting him rip the page out of a library book, because, you know, it's a library book. Even gangsters don't control public libraries, apparently. And yet he listens to her because that's who he is. He'll shoot a man for looking at him the wrong way, but he won't rip out the page of a book if his baby sister doesn't want him to. That's what I mean by distinct personality. Anthony Bridgerton doesn't exactly achieve the same thing. Like I said, Anthony is a very straight-cut, serious dude. He's stoic, a little bit intense, kind of unapproachable, wouldn't be caught dead cracking a joke. In the way Tommy Shelby is still interesting to watch, though his character archetype isn't unique, Anthony Bridgerton is sort of alright. Yes, he has his moments, but as a leading man in a romance, I found him okay. Jonathan Bailey is great in this role, and I really do think he brings charm to the character. I just wish we'd gotten more of it.
How many?
3.
Seriously? Y'all wait until the last episode to give this man some personality? Antony has duties to fulfill, and one of the big ones is getting married, finding a viscountess so that he can take care of the family and carry on the Bridgerton name. Family and duty are his main motivations in life, so much so that everything he does is for other people. He never gets to do anything for himself. Not really. Throughout the entire season, he's strained with the weight of the responsibility he's under and fights with this notion that he's not allowed to satisfy himself. He argues with multiple members of his family about this duty versus his happiness, multiple people advising him to choose himself for once and him pushing back, continuously choosing his duty. I'm not against this sort of character. It is definitely a thing that happened to people and still does happen to people. Is it a little bit cliche? Sure, especially when you realize that Antony became this stoic, serious guy after his father died. But that's not to say it's entirely bad. There is stuff about this part of his character that I enjoyed. In episode 1, there's this shot of Antony checking his pocket watch, and then later, in episode 3, there's a shot of Antony's father checking his pocket watch that's very similar to the first one. I loved this. I found it to be a thoughtful way of visually showing the relationship Antony had with his father, and how close the two of them actually were. The shot of the pocket watch in episode 3 comes in a flashback when we see Antony's father die. Even though the whole scene serves as a way to show the audience the closeness between Antony and his father, I actually think that shot of the watch is the best part, because it relays so much information without saying a word. There's another scene in episode 3 that takes place shortly after their father's death, when Antony's mother Violet is about to give birth to their youngest child, Hyacinth. The doctor informs Antony that there is a chance that either his mother or the baby could die during the birth, and that he, as the man of the family, must make the decision of who to save. This is obviously a terrifying and overwhelming thing to ask of a 19-year-old, and he eventually tells the doctor to do whatever his mother wants. I really liked this scene. It really shows how much stress is put onto Antony and reminds us that women's rights did not exist yet. How fun. People talk a lot about different relationships between the characters in this show, but I think one that doesn't get talked about enough is the dynamic between Antony and Daphne. And these two are actually kind of interesting to me, because I think Antony and Daphne are more similar to each other than even they realize. Though Antony is the oldest child of the family, Daphne is the oldest daughter, and that comes with its own set of duties and responsibilities. Daphne may not have to worry about the family's affairs in the same way Antony does, but she still has a very important and often stressful role to play in the family. Daphne's job is to be the perfect lady, to find a suitor, preferably someone with the same wealth and status the Bridgertons have, to get married and have children. It's important for her to do that, arguably more important than it is for the other daughters of the family, Eloise and Hyacinth. Daphne is the firstborn daughter. She sets the example. She has to do all of that to continue supporting the family and carry on the Bridgerton status, in the same way that Antony does. There's a reason Daphne is the first of the Bridgertons to get married, even though she's got 3 older brothers. If we were going by age, Antony, Benedict, and Colin should have gotten married far before Daphne did, but it never does go by age, does it? No, because being a 29-year-old unmarried man is much easier than being a 29-year-old unmarried woman. Daphne's place in the family sets her up to understand Antony better than anyone else, and vice versa, and you can tell. Antony doesn't open up to anyone in his family, and I know you're probably like, oh, but he's really close with his brothers, he always talks to Benedict and Colin, and to that I have to say, no he doesn't. He blows off steam with them, they joke around with him about the situation, but he doesn't genuinely talk to them about the Kate Edwina dilemma. The only people Antony genuinely talks and listens to about the situation are his mother Violet and Daphne. For example, these are the conversations he has with Benedict and Colin.
Arrogant and quite sure she knows best in every situation.
Oh, she sounds like a terrible nuisance.
Especially since you are the one who knows best in every situation.
If the Queen in fact names Eloise the diamond, whom will you marry then, brother?
What he means to say is that he has already dismissed every other young lady in town.
Does Miss Edwina return your affection?
Not yet. She would have done if it were not for
The sister. She's rather thorny, I take it.
He's meant to be a sipping spirit.
Have you not heard? The Viscount believes in hurrying things along these days. First the wedding, now his drink. I just hope for Edwina's sake the tendency stops before the honeymoon. We will have a tiny Antony to contend with, running around, declaring all of his tiny duties too, no doubt.
What is it we are drinking to, if not the future?
Well, the sister.
The sister.
The gatekeeper.
And for comparison, these are the conversations he has with his mother and Daphne.
Because I am courting her. Because I've decided.
And I had decided last year that I would marry the prince until you caught me in the garden with Simon at the Trowbridge ball under very similar circumstances.
Similar only.
It is clear that you have affection for Miss Sharma. The two of you cannot seem to stay away from one another.
Because she is aggravating.
Oh, is that what I just witnessed? But you must be honest with yourself. Because one way or another, these kind of feelings always have a way of coming to the surface.
And what kind of feelings are those?
Love.
This is your betrothal, Anthony. Your marriage. marrying a woman for whom you clearly hold no great tenderness or love. I wish for you two to know the joy of an exceptional marriage. You should be excited to wed Miss Edwina, but for all I have seen, you act as if you are approaching the gallows instead.
I witnessed you change the day he died. Do you know you did not even weep once? It was as though you had become an entirely different person, consumed by the expectations of others.
And what choice did I have?
You can choose to be happy, to follow the desires of your heart instead of pushing away any feeling that comes to the surface.
Wildly different. The conversations he has with his mother and Daphne are real, the kind that are imperative to the course of his life. Because of their understanding of each other, Antony actually feels like he can have these kinds of conversations with them, even if he's just pushing back against what they're saying the entire time. I don't think he'd ever have these conversations with Benedict or Colin, or his other siblings, in a million years, which is why I think his relationship with Daphne is interesting. They can actually talk to each other. Now, technically, the fact that he doesn't really talk to his other siblings about his issues can be another part of his character. Antony is the sort of person who feels he has to do everything himself, so maybe it wouldn't be in line with his character for him to speak openly with his other siblings. Antony even remarks in one of the episodes that he half suspects that his siblings despise him. My problem with that is that it doesn't feel entirely right, at least not at the point where the show left it. I would have loved to see Antony worry about this, to feel the disappointment and pain of doing everything for your family and still suspecting that none of them like him, that his very desire to help them is what makes them hate him. Now, it's clear that his family don't hate him. Yes, they have their ups and downs, but there's no hatred there. But Antony doesn't know that. Have him worry. It would add another thick layer of stress and insecurity to Antony's character that I think would have been so interesting to explore, especially because in episode 6, Daphne says this.
I mourn for you, brother. All of these decisions that you seem to make and then resent us for.
This implies that the miscommunication goes both ways. As much as he worries that his siblings hate him, his siblings also worry that he hates them. This could have been a genuinely interesting thing to delve into, but the show only ever throws out a couple thought-provoking lines here and there and doesn't actually provoke those thoughts any further. Massive waste of potential. But even though the show sometimes does a good job with Antony's character, there are also parts that they drop the ball with. I feel like there's a disconnect between what we're told about Antony and what we actually see of him. We're told that Antony is a man all about family, but what we see doesn't always support that. In episode 7, the Bridgertons and Sharmas are ostracized from society after Edwina calls off her wedding to Antony because she discovered Kate's feelings for him. To push back against this judgmental behavior and rumors about what could have happened, the Bridgertons and Sharmas decide to host a ball together to show everyone that there's no bad blood between them and that calling off the wedding was a mutual, amicable decision. However, no one shows up, and they realize it's because Lady Whistledown, the town's gossip writer, has published a piece about Eloise, exposing that she's been spending time amongst commoners and political radicals. This puts the Bridgerton name at even more risk, and Eloise, embarrassed and devastated that she's hurt her family, runs away from the ball. And Antony Bridgerton, Mr. Family Man himself, storms out in anger. This really upset me for a couple reasons. I understand that Antony is upset and worried about the family's reputation. He's trying to make it right and have society accept the Bridgertons as a respectable family again, and Eloise's actions just messed that up even further. But instead of storming out and having sex with Kate in the gazebo, he should have gone after Eloise. It would make a lot of sense for the type of character we're being told he is, and would give us a serious character moment between Antony and Eloise, which I don't think we ever get. And side note, that's another thing that feels a little disjointed about this show, the relationships between the siblings. We're told that all of the siblings are super close and love each other, and we get to see some of that in group scenes in their living room, but outside of those, there are some characters that just don't talk to other characters, Antony and Eloise being two of them. And I understand that in a big family like this, you're going to be closer to some siblings than other ones, but that's just another reason why I think Antony should have gone after Eloise after Lady Whistledown exposed her. Let us see a conversation between two siblings who aren't the closest. What does that look like? Lucky for you, I answered that question by writing a scene between them. So, here is a dramatic and probably cringy reading of Bridgerton, the scene that should have been. Interior, Eloise's bedroom. Night. Eloise bursts into the room, trying to hold herself together. As soon as the door is shut, the tears welling in her eyes spill over. She advances into the room, hand covering her mouth, trying to calm herself down. The door flies open behind her, and Antony enters. Eloise rips around to face him. Brother, do you despise me? Beat. Eloise is stunned. What? Do you despise me, Eloise? Eloise registers the question, shakes her head. No, of course not. Then why? Why would you ever engage in such activities? Do you at all understand the predicament we are in? The Bridgerton name, our family name, is at risk. Oh, I hope you're not insinuating it is solely my actions that are putting this family at risk. It was not my bride who ran out of my wedding, brother. Anthony shakes his head, aggravated at the reminder. It is not me who is hopelessly in love with her sister. I am trying to fix it. But I cannot do that if you are off associating with men below your station, political radicals at that. Is that what you've been doing all those days when you were taking a walk or arranging flowers with pen? Silence. Eloise can't meet Anthony's eyes. You knew it was wrong. Otherwise you would not have lied about it. I lied about it because I understood that you would behave in this exact manner, that you and Mother would never let me step foot outside the house again if you should know. And for good reason. Look what you have done. You truly do not understand, do you? You are so enamored with the world of Eloise Bridgerton, doing whatever strikes the fancy of Eloise Bridgerton. You do not think for a second the burden you place on me as the person who now has to clean up your mess. Oh, you must despise me. What have you done to me? Eloise looks up now. She watches Anthony, tense and worried about the situation, and anger simmers in her eyes. What have I done to you? Did it ever cross your brilliant mind, brother, that my actions had nothing to do with you? That I associated with those people because they challenged me? Because I found them interesting and they me? Because they did not look at me and see a woman to be wed or a name and status to be captured, but a person worth knowing, none of which my own family see? Anthony is stunned. Out of everything he thought Eloise might say, this was far from it. I did not go down there time and time again to hurt you. And I truly apologize for the difficulties I'm causing you now, but I cannot retract my actions, nor do I want to. Eloise sinks onto her bed, defeated. Anthony watches her. His anger has dissipated, replaced by a sense of sadness. The room fills with fatigue. You asked me why. Why I went down there, and why I continued, though I understood the scandal in which it could result should people know. I did it because I wanted to. Because it made me happy. Eloise looks up at Anthony. Have you never wished to be selfish, brother? For just one moment? Anthony looks at her, but cannot hold her gaze. He looks away. For the first time in his life, he fully understands Eloise. He understands her question and has his own painful answer. And scene. Is it a perfect scene? No, far from it. It's literally the first draft of something that I whipped up in maybe 15 minutes. But I think it does some good character work for both Anthony and Eloise, and feeds into two other aspects of Anthony's story that is already heavily featured in the show: his myopic view of the family and his duty, and the fact that he never lets himself be selfish. It could also be a catalyst for what he does in the next scene with Kate, when he finally lets himself be selfish and chooses to spend the night with Kate. And on top of that, it further reinforces Anthony's notion that his siblings genuinely don't like him and don't care about the stress he's under. The scene I wrote is not a heartwarming moment between siblings, nor would it make much sense for it to be one. What it is appropriate fallout from a situation that is played off as very serious in the show, yet somehow is never addressed, at least not by the main players in the scene, Anthony and Eloise. And I'm not just making this up or projecting my own interpretations onto it. In the scene itself, we see Eloise's reaction and Anthony's reaction. The only other close-up in the scene is of Violet and Lady Danbury, who literally look from Eloise to Anthony. They sew up the scene. They show the audience that these are the two people we should be focusing on, that this is their conflict, and yet nothing comes of it. Massive waste of potential. I think the closest we get to Anthony having a true bond with his siblings is when he asks his youngest sister Hyacinth to dance with him, and when he talks to his youngest brother Gregory about their father. Both of these are very sweet in their own right, and it's kind of sad that we don't get more of it. Anthony's relationship with his family is a sort of conundrum. In a way, it seems like when he says he cares about his family, he more so cares about the idea of the Bridgertons, aka the family name and status. And that could have been a fine character issue, except that the show also tries to make us believe that Anthony does care about his family as people. It's like half the writers wanted him to care more about the Bridgerton name, and the other half wanted him to care about them as individuals, and it makes the character behave in a way that is contradictory. Anyway, one of the main appeals of a character like Anthony Bridgerton for me is seeing them break. Like I said, Anthony is under a lot of stress. He's always busy, he's always tense. He acts very put together, but underneath, he's always sort of floundering with the sheer scale of the responsibilities he has. People like this can seem like they have everything under control, while simultaneously being on the verge of crumbling constantly. There is only so much responsibility one person can take on for themselves before they break, and that's the one thing I think we needed to see from Anthony Bridgerton, a breakdown. I'm not talking about some snippy words or raised voices in the living room. I am talking about a full-on, tears streaming, difficult to speak, feeling helpless, feeling like you're dying breakdown. And the thing is, we do get something similar. In episode 7, after the failed ball put on by the Bridgertons and the Sharmas, Anthony follows Kate outside to the gazebo and spills his soul to her, telling her how difficult it is to go through life never choosing himself. He finally breaks and lets it all out when he's outside with Kate, right before he's inside Kate. In the same vein, in episode 8, after Kate has a bad fall and is unwell, Anthony's mother apologizes that he had to be the one with his father when he died. She says that even if their marriage had to end the same way, she would do it again every time, and she advises Anthony to go to Kate. These two instances express similar emotions that I wanted this character to explore, but never in a way that did it full justice. You see, the underlying reasoning and motivation for both these scenes is love, specifically Anthony's feelings for Kate. These scenes are not primarily about their responsibilities, which is what I really wanted Anthony to break down over. Don't get me wrong, revelations like this can come because of love, but I would have enjoyed it a lot more if Anthony had just talked about the crippling pressure he's faced for a decade. When the scene with Anthony and his mother came around, I got excited because I thought that's what we were going to get. Anthony is always so caught up with taking care of other people in his life, but who takes care of him? That's the conversation I want to hear between Anthony and his mother. I want to hear Anthony and his mother talk about the stress, the responsibilities, and how unfortunate and unfair it was for Anthony to have to take all of that on at just 19. The show was so close to doing that, and then it just didn't. Massive waste of potential. Okay, I've spent like 15 minutes talking about one character, so let's talk about the other one now. Kate Sharma is the oldest child of the Sharma family. She spent most of her life in India away from high British society as a result of a scandal her stepmother went through when she was courting, but has returned to England now to find her younger sister Edwina a husband. Kate seems to have everything planned out. She's capable and protective, she holds her head high, she doesn't take crap from anyone. She knows her worth and never lets anyone walk all over her. Talking about Kate, I have to bring up the awesome representation of South Asian women in this season of Bridgerton. As a South Asian woman myself, it is wonderful. South Asian culture is already underrepresented in media, so to see it shown loud and proud in one of the most popular television series in recent memory is very heartening. I know it's been talked about to death already, all over TikTok especially, but we don't get much opportunity to gush about this, so allow me to talk about it even though you've probably already heard it before. The great thing about Kate specifically is that she is a dark-skinned South Asian woman, and it is very rare to see someone like her on screen. Colorism is still a huge issue in South Asia, and that prejudice definitely carries over to the media produced there. Bollywood itself, as significant as an industry it is, portrays little to no dark-skinned actors, leaving a giant population of people wholly unrepresented. On top of that, South Asian women especially are always told they're too dark, even if their skin tone is like medium. This is a real thing that happens. Every single South Asian woman has experienced it, I guarantee you. So to see a character like Kate Sharma portrayed by stunning actress Simone Ashley is groundbreaking. But it's not just the fact that she's here that makes this so great. It's the fact that Anthony falls for her and has no problem with her skin tone. It's not even a thought that crosses his mind, or any of the other characters' minds. Kate is beautiful, Kate is worth loving, and Kate is worth marrying, and all of that is a given. Her heritage or skin tone is not a problem at all. So often when we do get some sort of South Asian character in media, they're written to be the ugly one, or the character has major issues with self-esteem. They don't think they're anything special. Bridgerton says screw that, and gives us a heroine who's sure of herself, who knows she's awesome, who does like herself, and gives us a hero who also sees all of that with no trouble at all. That's the best part. That's the part that has all the girlies on TikTok screaming, because it's something worth screaming about. By the way, I am somehow on Bridgerton TikTok. I have no idea how I got there, it just sort of happened. Although I'm now starting to move away from Bridgerton TikTok and more into Heartstopper TikTok. Oh, and don't worry, Heartstopper is the next video. Anyway, the great representation doesn't just apply to Kate. Edwina too is given the same treatment. I mean, she gets named the Diamond of the Season in the very first episode, meaning she's literally the most desirable person during the wedding season. Everybody wants to be with her. She has countless prospects. She would have no trouble finding someone who she loves and who loves her. The certainty in which love and respect is given to these women is beautiful. It's so heartening to see. Kate and Edwina are now the new gold standard of South Asian representation in Western media, and I will take nothing less than them. So the rest of Hollywood, please take notes. And Bollywood too. Colorism is not sexy, stop that. In addition to the treatment of Kate and Edwina, Bridgerton also incorporates other aspects of South Asian culture into the show. I love that Edwina calls Kate Didi, which means older sister, and that Kate calls Edwina Bon, which is an effective term for little sister. You can see the influence in some of their clothes and jewelry too, and of course, the big scene is the haldi scene. The haldi ceremony is an important part of South Asian wedding preparations. It's a ritual where a paste of turmeric, oil, and water is applied to the bride and groom right before the wedding ceremony. The haldi acts as a blessing to the couple and ensures their marriage is a prosperous one, warding off against the evil eye. It's a staple of Indian weddings and was so nice to see in the show, but I think the best part of this scene is the background music. The music played in the background of this scene is a classical rendition of the song Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, the title track of a Bollywood movie of the same name. And I have many issues with Bridgerton, but this song is not one of them. It is beautiful, and the fact that it was chosen for this scene makes me so happy. It makes me think the writers did their damn research. Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham is one of the most beloved Bollywood movies ever made, and I'm not exaggerating about this. The film is like the face of 90s Bollywood. It is such a cultural staple. Every South Asian person knows this movie. Even if they haven't seen it, they know of it. We know the actors, we know the characters, we know the plot, and most importantly, we know the music. Music is so important in Bollywood. The music makes the movie. Without the music, there is no movie. Every song in Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham is a home run, but the title track is one of the most popular. This song defined an era and is still immensely popular today. I had seen bits and pieces of this movie throughout my childhood, and I knew the music religiously, but it was when I revisited it a couple years ago on Netflix that I was reminded by just how good this movie is. It has an all-star cast delivering all-star performances, a story for the ages, and some of the best music in all of Bollywood. Hearing Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham in a behemoth of a show like Bridgerton felt like a glitch in the Matrix, but in the best way possible. It's something a lot of people never imagined would happen, so hearing it behind the haldi scene especially was so fun, and it's incredible that out of all the music to come out of season 2 of Bridgerton, it was Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham that blew up the way it did. If you like this cover, I highly suggest you check out the original song from the movie. I'll leave it linked in the description. And hell, check out the movie itself. It's 3.5 hours, it's on Netflix, go make yourself a milkshake and sit down and watch it one night because it's definitely worth it. So yeah, I really enjoyed the representation of South Asian culture in Bridgerton. If I have one complaint, it's that Edwina wore a Western wedding dress in episode 6. She should have worn a wedding sari or lehenga. They are gorgeous and she would have looked incredible. But everything else was great. I love how Bridgerton wasn't really flashy about it either. They didn't shout from the rooftops, "Look at how inclusive we're being, look at all the representation." No, they did it in a way that was natural, incorporating the little things that mean a lot, like the names Didi and Bon, like the usage of Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, even down to Kate lamenting about how lackluster British tea is and insisting on making her own Indian cha. It's subtle and natural and makes it all the more powerful. Speaking of tea, excuse this interruption as we bring you this very special program, How to Make Cha, the way that I do it. Me and my family make like the exact same cha every single day. It's very easy and very good. So let's make cha. We basically just put in a bunch of spices and boil it. That's kind of it. So we have tejpata or bay leaf. Ooh, just rip that up and throw it in the pot. And then in a paper towel, we're gonna take some eloise or cardamom, even though this says cumin, which is spelled wrong. Take some black pepper and some lobongo or cloves. This is called a puta, which is fun for both Bengali speakers and Spanish speakers. I actually have no idea if that's what this is actually called, but it's what my parents call it, so puta. And then you just smash up all your spices. And after they're adequately smashed, you toss it into the water and wait for it to boil. Oh, you also add some ginger. Do we have ginger? Oh, and if you have cinnamon sticks, you can toss that in there too. I usually don't put a tea bag in my cha because the longer it sits there, I realize the more of a headache it gives me. And I don't know why that is. I think there may be some sort of scientific reason behind that. If anyone knows, please let me know. But yeah, I basically just drink spicy water. And it's really good, especially if you put some honey in it. Okay, now that we know how to make the superior version of cha, let's talk a little bit more about Kate. Kate is the firstborn daughter of the Sharma family. She's actually her father's child from a previous marriage, but after her mother died, her father married her stepmother, Lady Mary Sheffield, much to the dismay of her parents, and then they had Edwina. In fact, a big reason the Sharma girls grew up in India was because of the ostracization Mary faced for marrying a man that was both below her status and who also had a previous daughter. Her own parents didn't approve of the union, and from what I can remember, completely cut off Mary and her family financially. Now, years later, Kate has brought Edwina and her stepmother Mary back to England in order for Edwina to find a husband. And their being back here is a little bit stressful since people remember the scandal that ensued with Mary's marriage and her essentially running off to India. Kate's mother died when she was just a kid, leaving her with just her father before she then had Mary as a stepmother. But her father also died, leaving just the 3 women. And because of this, Kate took on the responsibility for her family from a very young age and has always put their needs in front of her own. Kate's main desire in life is to make sure her family is well taken care of. The Sharmas don't have much money after their father's death, and as a family of solely women, that's a problem. But her grandparents, the Sheffields, have recently agreed to support the family if and only if Edwina marries properly, aka marries a dude who's filthy rich. So Kate wants to make sure that Edwina finds a good husband to satisfy her grandparents' conditions and save the family's financial situation, while also making sure Edwina actually loves the man she marries, since she never wants Edwina to be unhappy. It's a difficult task, especially since she's got the hots for the one guy Edwina seems to be interested in. But Kate has grown up choosing Edwina over herself. Edwina's happiness means the world to Kate, and she'll do anything to ensure her younger sister's happiness and well-being. She always wants to protect her. I mean, when Anthony first shows interest in Edwina, Kate is 100% against the idea of her marrying him, since Kate knows Anthony isn't looking for a love match, more so someone to take care of the household, and that's it. Kate does not want that for Edwina, even though Anthony is really rich and would definitely satisfy her grandparents' conditions. She knows Edwina would not be happy in that kind of a marriage, and Edwina's feelings are way more important than her grandparents' wishes. Kate has never chosen herself. She has a duty to her family and intends to continue fulfilling it regardless of the stress and pressure and unhappiness she may feel. Because in her head, it's better for her to shoulder all of that herself than to let Edwina even feel a drop of it. It has always been Edwina first, Kate second. She's giving Angelica Schuyler in Satisfied. Kate is the quintessential firstborn daughter that must shoulder all of the burdens of the family and act as if her back isn't breaking. It's through this that Kate and Anthony's characters have a lot of deliberate parallels. Both lost the main breadwinner of their households, and as a result have had to take responsibility over the family when they were still basically kids. Both have always put the needs and desires of other people ahead of their own, and both have never done anything for themselves, so much so that they don't even know what that would even look like. Because of this, Kate and Anthony have an understanding of each other that very few other people in their lives do. Kate recognizes herself in Anthony, and it might be why she's so drawn to him. For me, Kate is more of a consistent character than Anthony is. There is never a moment when Kate is on screen that I don't think her primary motivation is keeping Edwina happy. There's no disconnect like Anthony has. Kate clearly wants to protect Edwina, that's not even a question. Not only does she have a deep love for her sister, but she also has her own relationship with Anthony's siblings, which I enjoyed. Daphne and Eloise specifically really like her and form their own rapport with her. Daphne thinks she's a respectable lady, and Eloise loves that Kate is 26 and unmarried, and doesn't have plans to wed anytime soon. Seeing as Eloise is very against the whole idea of marriage, it makes sense that she would look up to Kate because of this. Of course, Kate does get married by the end of the season, so I don't know what that means for Eloise's impression of her. And to be honest, the one-on-one relationship she builds with the Bridgerton siblings happens in the earlier episodes, and then is sort of forgotten about, so I don't really know what point I'm trying to make here. But the most compelling aspect of Kate's character is her fierce protectiveness of the people she loves most, and most notable among that group is Edwina. Let's take a second to talk about her. Edwina is young and wide-eyed. She's a very sweet person who always seems to think the best of people and never has a bad word to say. Kate raised her to be the perfect wife, with great posture, knowledge of languages, and artistic skills. Clearly, ever since they were young, Kate had already made the decision that Edwina would be the one to marry well, and Kate would be there to support her. I imagine this is because Kate already understood how ostracized from society she would be. After all, she's her father's child from a previous marriage. She's already an outcast, so her best bet is to make sure Edwina gets the perfect marriage. Edwina trusts Kate infinitely. She loves and respects her and understands that Kate is always looking out for her. For the majority of the season, Edwina is a very likable presence, and she and Kate share a beautiful relationship. And then episode 6 rolls around. This is where Edwina starts to become a little annoying. In episode 6, Edwina is about to get married to Anthony when she finally realizes the extent of Anthony and Kate's feelings for each other. She gets upset at Kate, wondering why her sister would encourage this marriage if she herself was so in love with Anthony, and Kate comes clean about their grandparents' conditions for her marriage. Kate, who has been holding all of these issues in, finally unloads them onto Edwina, which probably hurts her more than having Edwina yell at her. And what does Edwina do? She gets upset that Kate lied. And this is truly where Edwina starts to lose people, including me. As a younger sibling who has an older sister with an age gap very similar to that of Kate and Edwina, if my older sister told me she had been dealing with a million different problems and didn't let me know beforehand because she didn't want me to have to deal with it, I would not be upset at her. I would be pretty sad that she had to deal with that all by herself. And for sisters as close as Kate and Edwina, I think that's how Edwina should have reacted too. From here on out, Edwina unfortunately becomes more and more annoying, as she shuns Kate for not telling her about their grandparents' conditions and her attraction to Anthony. And neither of these conflicts really work for me. I've already covered their grandparents' conditions, but let's talk about Edwina's supposed love for Anthony. I don't buy it, I'm sorry. They've known each other for maybe a few weeks at most. They've never had super deep conversations. They've never even been alone together. At least Kate and Anthony have related to each other on a deeper level, at least a little, and shared intimate moments away from the eyes of society. But Anthony and Edwina don't have any of that, and technically, they're not supposed to. In the Regency era, most marriages were ones of convenience, not love. People got married and then got to know each other afterwards, and if you were lucky, some sort of love came from that. That's the sort of marriage that Anthony and Edwina were going to have, so it doesn't make much sense for Edwina to be so heartbroken that Kate loves Anthony. Edwina shouldn't love Anthony, not to the extent Bridgerton would have us believe. There needed to be some sort of rewrite here to create a believable conflict between Kate and Edwina, because right now, Edwina is just being petty for no reason, and it's not enjoyable to watch. Edwina is the reason younger siblings get a bad rep. What are you doing? Get it together, girl! Kate has a similar moment of breakdown that Anthony experienced, but once again, it's more to do with her love and relationship with Anthony. There is some talk of her guilt about how she messed up Edwina's chances, and her mother reassuring her that it wasn't her fault and that she shouldn't be so hard on herself, but it doesn't quite get to the point I would have liked it to. Overall though, Kate and Edwina are fine. I do really like Kate, and I think she's a good representation of the plight of firstborn daughters. It's heartening to see a character like this get her happy ending, especially when people like this in real life so often don't. Speaking of her happy ending, let's talk about Cantony. The relationship between Kate and Anthony is obviously a very important part of the show, since Bridgerton is first and foremost a show about love and relationships. I was pretty on board with this union from the start, largely because it seemed like it was going to follow an enemies to lovers romance arc, and if you know me at all, you know I am absolute trash for this kind of romance. I am of the opinion that Enemies to Lovers is one of the best romance arcs ever. It's right up there with Friends to Lovers, but Enemies to Lovers is extra special to me because it often involves more interesting conflicts and more spicy drama, at least in my opinion. The appeal of an Enemies to Lovers romance is seeing two people who are fundamentally on opposite sides to one another slowly start to form a rapport that eventually turns into love. And as a result of the massive journey from opposite sides to the same side that these characters have to make, Enemies to Lovers romances tend to be slow burns. It's juicy, it's emotive, it's thrillingly good. Kate and Anthony definitely follow this arc, and there is a lot of stuff to like about them. Because of how similar the two of them are, it doesn't take much for them to clash, especially since one's ideologies fundamentally goes against the other's. Anthony's idea of marriage is a union of convenience. No love, no passion, just mutual respect. He wants a wife purely out of duty, and thinks Edwina will be good enough to fill the role. Kate, on the other hand, despises this idea because she doesn't think anyone, much less her little sister, deserves to be in such a lackluster marriage. Her idea of a good marriage, especially for Edwina, is one full of love, compassion, and understanding, a union in which both parties would never think about not being together. These two opposing ideals and desires is what makes them butt heads and not think too highly of each other. Both are getting in the way of what the other wants, yet they're brought together through a common denominator, Edwina. Edwina has her sights set on Anthony, and Kate's love for her sister is what makes her decide to get to know Anthony better. Anthony doesn't necessarily love Edwina, but she's the diamond of the season and the perfect bride for Anthony's purposes, so in order to successfully court her, he needs to win over Kate. All the while, both are trying very hard to ignore the fact that the other is very hot and might be fun to have a roll on the hay with. On top of that, they're fun to watch together. Their strong personalities complement each other. They're both very proud people and incredibly competitive. They don't take too well to being told what to do and like to be in control all the time. It's fairly well thought out. I don't have much complaint on the setup of the relationship. However, I do have some complaint about the progression of the relationship. Like I said before, the appeal of an enemies to lovers romance is seeing two people who hate each other get over that hatred and slowly start to fall for each other. This usually happens when the characters learn more about each other and start to form a bond that's based on emotion. However, with Kate and Anthony, a lot of the time, their attraction to each other feels purely physical rather than emotional. It's not like the major beats aren't enjoyable, because they are. The beasting scene is a fan favorite from this season, and I understand why. For context, Kate and Anthony are out in the garden arguing when a bee lands on Kate's chest. Anthony is immediately struck with fear, telling her not to move, but Kate doesn't think too much of it, tries to swat the bee, and gets stung. And this causes Anthony to have a panic attack, which makes sense. The last time he saw someone get stung by a bee, it was his father, and he died. Anthony starts hyperventilating, convinced Kate is going to drop dead, so Kate places his hand on her chest, aka her titties, to show him she's fine and calm him down. This makes things awkward between them, because, you know, you don't just grab a titty in the Regency era and move on, but I'm not entirely compelled by this. I get that it's a different time period, when where touching an ungloved hand is very dramatic and full-on grabbing a titty is scandal-worthy, but I mean, my guy was having a panic attack. I don't think titties is what I would be thinking about in that moment. So, yeah, it's a fun scene, and it shows they're clearly attracted to each other, but I think it starts a trend that we see with Cantony scenes. In episode 4, Edwina suggests Kate join the men on their hunt since it'll give her a chance to get to know Antony better on her own. She agrees, but very quickly becomes exasperated at the men for not taking her advice on how to find more game, so she goes off on her own, forcing Antony to find her. This leads to more banter and Antony teaching Kate how to properly hold a British gun in the classic romantic moment. Again, I liked this, okay? I'm not made of stone. No matter how many times we get a moment of the characters showing each other how to do something properly by getting behind them and guiding them, I'm going to like it. It doesn't matter how overdone or cheesy it is, okay? I'm going to enjoy it. And clearly, Kate and Antony are enjoying it too, since they both seem a little bit hot and bothered by this. In episode 5, Kate and Antony have their most heated moment yet. After an unsuccessful dinner between the Bridgertons and Sheffields, in which everyone finds out about the conditions of Edwina's marriage, Antony and Kate talk about whether or not to call off the wedding between him and Edwina, and it gets a little too hot. This is the scene with the line from Bridgerton season 2.
You are the bane of my existence, and the object of all my desires.
They get really close, with Antony whispering sweet nothings into her ear about all the ways a lady can be seduced. And I have to be honest, I really like this scene. It's hot, it's steamy, it's definitely a good time, and I love the way it's shot. The entire thing is shot so close to both of them, so close that the background is faded out and all we can see is these two through a hazy, intoxicating lens. The handheld shots feel restless and intimate, and you can really imagine yourself in the scene. It's great. But even though I liked it, I couldn't get one thought out of the back of my mind. Why? All of these scenes point out a big problem in this show, which is that almost every romantic moment between these two seems to be purely physical. And I'm not saying that you can't find someone physically attractive. Two people who don't necessarily like each other can still find themselves drawn to each other on a physical level. But for me personally, the highlight of an enemies to lovers romance is seeing the characters get over their differences on an emotional level, which then leads to a physical connection. Kate and Antony never really have that. Most of the time, it just seems they're into each other because they're hot. And it's a real shame because Kate and Antony's characters could work so well together. Emotional conversations between the two of them could be very powerful, as each realizes the extent to which the other understands them. For example, in episode 4, the Bridgertons and Sharmas are staying at the Bridgertons' country home, but due to a thunderstorm, Kate has trouble sleeping. So she goes to the house's library since her father used to read to her during storms, and Antony, who is also restless because of the storm, finds her here. Antony tells Kate the books were his father's and reveals to her that his father was killed by a bee sting, and Kate realizes that's why he reacted the way he did when she was stung by a bee. They stare at each other for a moment, then the spell is broken by a clap of thunder, and Kate leaves the library. I think this scene is a perfect example of Bridgerton quitting in an untimely fashion. This scene could have been a much-needed moment of emotional bonding between Kate and Antony. It shouldn't have ended so quickly. These two needed to discuss their fathers further, maybe even talk about how hard the deaths hit them and the way they took over their respective families afterwards. That sort of conversation would have brought them a lot closer, and each would have realized how similar they were to the other. That sort of understanding is the kind of thing that builds a strong bond between two people. It would have progressed their relationship further and made the scene in the next episode, where they get borderline sexual with each other, make a lot more sense. If they had had just one moment of bonding, then the bane of my existence, object of all my desires line, as good as it already is, would be 10 times more impactful. But without that emotional bond, it leaves the scene feeling a little strange. Like, the lonely, hopeless romantic in me is loving it, but the writer in me is screaming, why? It could have been so much better. Massive waste of potential. My other problem with Kate and Antony's romance is that their conflict does get a little bit repetitive. Like I said, I really liked how it started off. I think the show did a great job of making these two fun and interesting to be around, and they were easy to root for. However, as the episodes continue on and the conflicts start to fall away, it really does feel like the show is trying to manufacture drama just for the sake of stretching the season to an 8-episode runtime. It starts to get tiring. First, they don't like each other, then they're attracted to each other, then they have to stay away from each other. Kate doesn't want Antony to marry Edwina, but due to circumstances, now she does. Things blow up in their face and they make out, then they agree it was a mistake and they should be ashamed of it. They have to stay away from each other to save their family's reputations, but then they have sex and then they realize it was a mistake. Antony wants to marry her for honor or some crap, but Kate rejects him because she's going back to India. But then they dance and they say they love each other and kiss and it's cute, but also I'm tired. By episode 6, I was getting more and more tired with their dynamic, primarily because episode 6 is where everything blows up in their faces, and then the show doesn't have a great grasp on new conflicts to follow the main ones after the first half of the season. A great example of how ridiculous it gets is in the final episode of the season. After Kate and Antony do it, Kate panics, rides off on a horse in the rain, falls off, and gets badly hurt. Antony brings her back to safety, but she's unwell for quite some time. After she wakes up, Antony wants to marry her because he loves her, and also because it's the Regency era and you can't just have sex and move on. Kate refuses him under the guise that she is returning to India. Later on, Kate has a conversation with her mother Mary in which she admits to Mary why she rejected Antony's proposal.
He does not love me,
I'm sorry, what? Girl, what did you just say? Are you really trying to tell me that you don't think this man loves you? After his entire speech in the gazebo right before you did the dirty? The one where he said things like this?
It is because I've never met anyone like you. It is maddening how much you consume my very being. All I find myself thinking about, all I find myself being able to breathe for, is you. Contending with these thoughts of wanting to be nowhere except with you. Wanting to run away with you. Ma'am,
this man spills his soul to you. This man's life and family is on the brink of ruin, and he can think about nothing but you. This man wants to run away with you. This man is so feral, so in love with you, that he can't help but smell your scent whenever you're near. Boy, if you don't stop sniffing her, I'm gonna have to throw a peanut at you. And you mean to tell me that you can't see that he loves you? Girl, you need to stop huffing Sharpies, because you're losing brain cells. And I know you can make the argument that Kate doesn't realize this because she doesn't think she deserves love, and Anthony never wanted a love marriage, but sorry, I'm gonna have to call bull, because literally within the same episode, Anthony makes another huge declaration of love to her, and this time, she believes it. Like, what was different about this one, girly? Why do you believe him now, and not a single time before? Is it because we finally hit our 8-episode, 8-hour runtime? Because it seems like it. Yeah, I have issues with Cantony, but overall they're fun to watch, I guess. So, let's move on to Eloise Bridgerton, because I've got stuff to say about her. Eloise Bridgerton is sort of the black sheep of the family. She's not at all like her other sisters, who are perfect ladies and fit into high society well. Eloise is loud, she's a bit crass, she's witty, and she doesn't mind stepping on people's toes. She's disgusted by the culture of courtship and marriage and hates that it's expected of her. She loves reading, she's fiercely protective of her friends, and would much rather have natural connections with people rather than the false connections made during courtship. In this season, Eloise is debuting, so she is officially on the marriage market, and she hates it. Of course she does. She's being forced to participate in a practice that she resents. And that's why I enjoy her budding relationship with Theo Sharp, a commoner who works at the printing press that prints Lady Whistledown's gossip. I can fully understand why Eloise would be interested in him. Theo is a regular guy. He is so far away from the often restrictive society Eloise comes from, and it's refreshing for her to be able to spend time with him. She doesn't have to worry about looking nice, or her posture, or her manners around him, unlike when she's with lords and dukes who want her hand in marriage. She can fully be herself around Theo, and that's important to her since Eloise hates being something she's not. But even more special about the relationship is that Theo is not talking to her to court her. He's not spending time with her in the hopes that it'll end in marriage. He's just a regular young man who's actually interested in her for who she is. He values her thoughts and enjoys listening to her opinions. He doesn't like her as a wife. He likes her as a person. And that's what endears him to Eloise. Eloise also enjoys spending time with him. She enjoys discussing politics with him and picking his brain about books. There's a scene where Theo gives her a stack of books to read because he wants to hear her opinions about them. Look, as a reader, that is one of the most romantic things I can think of. Her reaction sums up everything I have to say. For the first time ever, Eloise connects with a man not over money or status or just pressure to find companionship, but over things that they both enjoy, things that make them who they are. I really like that because it makes perfect sense for a character like Eloise, and the fact that Theo is not highborn is another layer that makes me invested in their relationship. Eloise is a lady, so she needs to marry someone of her status. She obviously can't marry some random commoner, so her and Theo starting to fall for each other makes for a new, if not a little predictable, conflict in the future. But as much as I enjoy the trajectory of Eloise and Theo's relationship, there are some drawbacks to it. Theo is first introduced in episode 2, I think, when Eloise tries to track down the printing house Lady Whistledown uses. She and Theo clash when he won't answer her questions, and he assumes she's a frivolous rich girl who has always gotten what she wants. And then he sort of disappears for like 3 episodes. This prolonged absence is strange, because it makes you sort of forget that he's even a character that has some sort of importance. Then he reappears in the later episodes of the season, and you're suddenly reminded that he exists. It's a little like Whiplash, and I think it's a result of poor pacing, which, oh my god, we will talk about later. Also, Eloise and Theo's relationship starts with the same dynamic that both Anthony and Kate, and I'm pretty sure Daphne and Simon did too, a place where neither particularly likes the other. And as much as I love a rivals to lovers story, using this many in the exact same show doesn't seem very creative, and I really hope we get different kinds of relationships in the future. I know Colin and Penelope will be different since they're friends to lovers, but I don't know anything about the other relationships. I can only hope that we don't keep dipping into the enemies to lovers bucket over and over again. If we're on the topic of Eloise's relationship with Theo, we have to touch on something else. There's one thing about Eloise that really needs to be talked about, and other people have pointed this out too, but Eloise Bridgerton is incredibly privileged. The Bridgertons are rich. Really rich. They're nobility. They're one of the most influential families in Britain. They are so important that the literal Queen of England hosts the weddings of the Bridgerton children. They are filthy rich and have a lot of sway in high society. And it's partly because of this immense privilege that Eloise can be so comfortable with her distaste for high society and courtship. It's no secret that in the Regency era, women's rights just didn't exist. Women didn't have the same privileges as men. They really did have to rely on the men around them in order to survive. Fathers and brothers were very important to have, along with husbands, especially for a woman of a lower class. Men were the only people who could make and hold money. If a woman was born into a lower class family, they would remain that way unless they could find a well-off husband. You see where I'm going with this, right? Eloise doesn't necessarily have to get married if she doesn't want to. Yeah, people would whisper about her and she would be seen as the lonely spinster, but that's it. She wouldn't die, she wouldn't lose anything, she would be fine because the Bridgertons are rich. Specifically, she has 3 older brothers who have money. Antony could very well support her for the rest of her life. So her distaste at courting and the idea of marriage is a little silly at times. She can talk so freely about it because in the long run, she doesn't need a husband in order to survive. There are probably lower-born women who share the same sentiments as Eloise, who want more from life than to be someone's wife. But unlike Eloise, they don't have the luxury to actually go through with it. They will force themselves to marry because not doing so will be devastating for them. Eloise's version of feminism and freedom is very narrow. And this privilege is present in all of her actions. Without her privilege, her entire relationship with Theo wouldn't exist at all. She has time in a day to try to uncover the mystery of Lady Whistledown's identity. She has the time to make trips down to see Theo because she literally has nothing else to do. I mean, the Bridgertons fill their days with Pall Mall and horse races and frivolous balls. Meanwhile, every time Eloise comes to see Theo, he is working. Everybody here is working. There's a scene in episode 8 where Eloise and Theo are trying to find the identity of Lady Whistledown, but upon getting a little too close to each other physically, Eloise decides to leave. People are already talking about her and Theo, and she doesn't want Theo to have to deal with the consequences of any relationship they may have. And Theo rightfully calls her out on her privilege.
It's all right, Miss Bridgerton. You dipped your toe into my waters, trying to make yourself feel better about the unearned advantages of your birth. Now you can go back to your life. And I can go back to mine.
And he has a point. As much as Eloise enjoys spending time with him, nothing can ever come of it because of their difference in class. And even though Eloise says she's leaving because she wants to protect Theo, let's be honest, it's also to protect herself. She can hate her high society all she wants, but when it comes down to it, she's still going to choose to go back rather than embrace a life in the slums. I really hope the show continues to address Eloise's crazy amount of privilege and how it influences her views on the world, because as much as I enjoy a good, society-rejecting character, it can be a little condescending when it solely comes from someone who spends her days playing Pall Mall and doing nothing else. I actually want to take a second to go back to that scene between Eloise and Theo in episode 8, because it's another example of Bridgerton trying to pad out its runtime. Because that scene in episode 8 is not the first time we had that exact interaction between these exact characters. In episode 7, after the Queen accuses Eloise of being Lady Whistledown, she goes down to the print shop to see Theo and make sure he's okay, to which he responds that people from the palace have come to question him and he feels he's in danger. Eloise treats it as a sort of game, one where they need to consult with each other and get their story straight. This upsets Theo, and he says he and Eloise need to stop seeing each other, calling her out on her privilege.
This is not the least bit surprising.
What is that supposed to mean?
It means that you are a lady who has never had to endure any real difficulties in your life. You may have the protection of your family, of your society, but I do not. You've taken your pleasure from low life, Miss Bridgerton. Now, I think it best you return to Mayfair before you get me into any more trouble.
This leaves both of them feeling hurt, but in the end, Eloise leaves. But later, in episode 8, Eloise gets a letter from Theo admitting that Lady Whistledown used the print shop to publish her scandal sheets. Eloise confronts him, upset he was lying to her this entire time, and Theo says he couldn't tell Eloise while Lady Whistledown was watching him, and that was the real reason he ended their relationship earlier despite not wanting to. He did it to protect her. So they work together to uncover Lady Whistledown's identity, and then that scene I spoke about earlier occurs, where Eloise tries to break off the relationship and Theo calls her out on her privilege. Do you see why I'm upset? We get essentially the same scene between these same characters in back-to-back episodes, rendering the first scene completely useless. There's no reason for the first scene to be here other than for manufactured drama that doesn't mean anything, that'll add more time onto the episode. It doesn't mean anything because it's retconned in the very next episode, and then that is retconned and we end up in the exact same place we were after the first scene. It's pure bloating for nothing. Bridgerton does this a lot, and it really gets on my nerves. It's pointless, it makes the show drag, and it makes the pacing a mess. but don't worry, we'll talk about it. I want to talk more in depth about Eloise's relationship with society, because I think there's some genuinely good nuggets to this. As much as Eloise scoffs at the culture of courting and the construct of marriage, she can't exactly stop any of it from getting to her. She's still a young woman who has grown up in a world where this is commonplace, where a poised, sophisticated woman is seen as a good woman, and for the life of her, Eloise can't be that. No matter how good it feels to not be a poised, sophisticated woman, there will always be part of her that feels inferior to them, especially when she's in front of the people she cares about, the people whose opinion she values. In episode 4, her mother invites a lord to dance with her, which does not go very well. This leads to her fleeing the ball with her mother running after her, and it's here where we see probably one of the most authentic moments from Eloise.
My rebellion, not some party dress I put on to play a part, Mama, and it is certainly not some accomplishment I have developed, like singing or painting to help me attract a suitor. I know I am a disappointment to you, so just allow me to take my leave and go to bed.
I was excited at that outburst, because she was finally portraying her real feelings and fears to her mother. Eloise doesn't care what other people think, but at the end of the day, she's still a young woman with a mother who wants her to be something that's completely different to who she actually is, and she fails at it continuously. I don't care how strong of a person someone is, that is still going to hurt, at least a little bit. I was so ready for this plotline to come back in the end, for Eloise to have some sort of heart-to-heart with her mother where she expresses how she just can't be what her mother wants her to be, and her mother tells her that she's not a disappointment, that even if things are difficult for her, she's still her daughter, and nothing is ever going to change her love for her. But no, it never gets brought up again. I'm not kidding. She has this moment where she expresses real conflict and has a real emotional breakthrough that is very imperative to her character, and we never hear about it again. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Bridgerton continuously brings up good ideas that can make for interesting themes and character moments, and doesn't do anything with them, and it gets really frustrating after a while. It's like someone decided that they're going to build this house, and they went through all the steps, they built it from the ground up, they're almost finished, and then they just decide to not build the roof. It is so annoying. And I already know that somebody is going to make the argument that this is not technically Eloise's story. Each of the Bridgerton siblings have their own romantic storylines to which we can only assume that the show will dedicate a whole season, so it's okay if this plotline isn't resolved. And to you I say, sit down and eat some papaya, because you deserve to have to put that god-awful fruit in your mouth for a take as stupid as that. Just because Eloise isn't the main character this season doesn't mean you can just leave her plotline wholly unresolved like that, especially for something so major. We still need some sort of resolution. Look, I have no idea what their plans for Eloise are in the future. I like Theo, but I know Theo is not the man she ends up with in the book, and the audience of Bridgerton is kind of split down the middle of who they like more, Theo or her book love interest. And then there's people who are like, yeah, footman romance, which I still have no idea if people are joking about that or if they're dead serious, but I do know that you cannot leave a giant plotline like this so blatantly unresolved just because you don't know what you might do with the character in the future. It's not even like they left it unresolved in a smart way to continue it in the coming seasons. No, leaving something unresolved in a way that's smart and deliberate would mean threading it through the season, touching on it enough to remind us that it's a conflict, and possibly amping up the tension around it a little bit more in the last episode or two to hint to us that it's going to be talked about in the coming seasons. This is not that. This is thrown at us once, smack dab in the middle of the season, and then completely disappears as if it never even happened. Both Eloise and Violet just go about their regular business as if they didn't have this heated conversation. They stand in the background of scenes together and laugh and smile as if one party didn't spill her fears to the other, and oh my god, it is so frustrating, especially because this show messes around so much. This show wastes your time with crap that doesn't matter. It's so boring at times. The pacing is so bad. Don't worry, we'll talk about it, and it's infuriating because we are wasting time when there are whole plot lines that could be explored, whole plot lines left unresolved, but instead of giving them satisfying conclusions, I'm forced to spend time with these people who make me want to rip my fingernails off. But I am getting ahead of myself. Look, I don't like being mean. I try not to be mean in my videos because at the end of the day, writing is really hard. But oh my god, you cannot tell me that this isn't infuriating. If you didn't want to make Eloise's insecurity an important part of the season, then cut the scene. If you wanted to save it to when she actually has her specific season, then cut the scene from this season. But at the same time, it makes sense that this would be part of her character this season because she's officially courting. She's looking for a husband, so it's perfectly appropriate that this part of her character is included. So how do you fix this? How do you do this character justice without leaving plotlines unresolved, without removing it and leaving the character feeling hollow? My suggestion? Replace Violet with Daphne. Daphne is sort of a foil to Eloise throughout the show. Daphne is everything Eloise should be. She's a respectable woman. She's a good mother and wife. You know, aside from the part where she sexually assaulted her husband and then manipulated him into thinking he was at fault. You really thought I wasn't going to bring that up? Daphne is sweet, she's kind, people like her effortlessly. Eloise is the exact opposite. She's not a sophisticated woman, she's kind of rude, she doesn't want to get married, and likely isn't too stoked about having children either. I'm pretty sure it's already established in season 1 that becoming Daphne is Eloise's worst nightmare. She'd rather die than be someone like Daphne, but of course she has to debut at some point, which means she has to act like Daphne. And as much as she hates it, there's also a part of her that's worried she's disappointing everyone around her by not being perfect at it the way Daphne was. Have Daphne be the one trying to support Eloise through the season, more so than Violet. Have Daphne try to impart her wisdom onto Eloise only to be thrown off by her. Have her suffocate Eloise so much that it leads to an emotional outburst at the ball where Eloise tells Daphne she's sorry she's disappointing them by not being the perfect lady Daphne and everyone else wants her to be. And instead of forgetting about it and acting like it never happened, keep the tension between Daphne and Eloise through the rest of the season. Maybe Daphne could try to talk to Eloise, but Eloise blows her off to go hang out with Theo because he makes her feel comfortable and safe. Maybe Daphne could get fed up with trying to deal with it herself and confides in Antony, and maybe Antony tries to offer her advice, but in the end brushes it off and lets Daphne handle it because he's got his own crap going on, and he, like most of the other members of the Bridgerton family, don't really understand Eloise. I think this also complements the scene I wrote between Antony and Eloise, since it feels like they're part of the same story and not just two people in their own worlds. And maybe in episode 7, when Eloise's associations with Theo and political radicals is revealed, after Antony confronts her about it, she and Daphne could talk. Daphne could apologize for ever making Eloise feel like she wasn't enough. She could apologize for contributing to an environment that made Eloise feel like she had to run away just to feel like herself, and reassure her that she will find happiness in life, whatever that may entail. In turn, Eloise could apologize for making Daphne's job of helping her that much harder, and always taking her own grievances and issues with self-esteem out on her. There. Plotline resolved. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than one half-assed scene that has no bearing on the rest of the plot. It also leaves open a future plotline involving Eloise and her mother. Instead of spending all the best parts of Eloise's potential character arc in a season where she's not the main character, I think it would be a good idea to save a conflict between her and her mother for her season. Again, I don't know what romance the showrunners will write for her, but assuming that it's with Theo, there's already a major built-in conflict there. Theo is below Eloise's status. That could be one of the conflicts between Eloise and her mother, where Eloise loves him but feels she would be disappointing in ostracizing her family, especially her mother, who has already gone through enough difficulties with losing her husband and having to raise 8 children. And if we really want to talk about her insecurities with how unladylike she is, that could be part of this conflict too. She's so bad at being a lady that she fell for the entirely wrong kind of person, a mistake none of her other siblings or any highborn lady would make. That can be another aspect of it, because after all, lifelong insecurities do not disappear over the course of one marriage season. I'm just writing Bridgerton for free at this point. I'd like financial compensation for this, please. I was gonna talk about Penelope and Colin, and then I realized I didn't want to, because I don't care. Penelope and Colin are just not interesting to me, which is a problem since they'll be getting their own season at some point. Let's hope they become interesting before then. I did like Eloise and Penelope's friendship and their major conflict at the end of the season. After the Queen puts pressure on Eloise to own up to being Lady Whistledown, which she isn't, Penelope publishes the gossip piece on Eloise about her and political radicals to throw off the Queen's scent, which is dumb because why wouldn't the Queen just think Eloise had done it? I get that one of the reasons the Queen thinks Eloise is Lady Whistledown is because she never published anything about Eloise, but if she suddenly did publish something about Eloise literally a day after the Queen threatened Eloise, that's still suspicious. Like, that's clearly just something she did to try to make Eloise look more innocent. Ugh, I don't know why I'm even trying. Back to the Eloise-Penelope conflict. After publishing the piece about Eloise, Penelope gives up being Lady Whistledown. Instead of writing about her findings, she gossips to Eloise about them at a ball, which leads Eloise to figuring out Pen is Lady Whistledown. Eloise is angry because Pen exposed to the whole country information Eloise had trusted Pen with and put her family name at risk. But Pen was writing as Lady Whistledown because she felt it was the only thing she had, and to earn some extra money, because, yeah, her family's kinda broke, and she gave it up for Eloise. I think it's an alright conflict. Both of them have their own coherent reasons for being upset at each other, and I guess it'll give them a hopefully interesting arc in the next season. I don't really have much else to say about it. There's a bunch of other stuff I could technically talk about, but I just don't want to because none of it matters to me. And I feel like that's a trend with Bridgerton. There is always so much happening in this show, so many characters and storylines that all feel shallow and unnecessary. Bridgerton sorely lacks focus, and a huge reason is because of the sheer number of characters there are. Each character obviously has to have their own storyline because if they don't, then they don't matter. But the subplots do nothing but bloat the show and waste your time. These subplots are useless. Oh my god. It is so hard to care about the side characters and their storylines. I don't care about Benedict and his art school. I don't care about Colin and whatever he had with Marina, although I think that may be my fault since I didn't watch season 1, but from the way I have trouble caring about romantic pairings in this season, I don't think that's the case. I don't care about Eloise and... oh my god, what was she doing this season? Oh, she oscillated between obsessing over Lady Whistledown and getting involved in women's rights. I actually almost forgot about her entire storyline. I'm not even joking. They are all bland and boring and just take up time for no reason. I get that you can't exactly cut these characters. I mean, they're the Bridgertons, they're part of the titular family, and it's important for us to spend time with them to then have an emotional investment in them for when their specific season rolls around. But Bridgerton does not know how to make them important and interesting. A great example is Benedict Bridgerton. Benedict's entire plotline in this season is that he's a fellow at an art school. He applies, he gets in, he gets high, he has sex, he does art, and then he finds out Antony paid for his entrance. But my question is, what was the point? Why does he matter? He doesn't. Nothing he does has any sort of bearing on the plot. It's like he's just living in his own little bubble away from the rest of the story, and it makes his scenes pointless. At least Penn's storyline actually impacts the plot. Lady Whistledown, as contrived as she is, actually helps or hurts people during the wedding season, so Penn sort of matters. At least Eloise's interest in politics develops a forbidden relationship and puts her family name in jeopardy. Even Daphne, who's in maybe 4 or 5 scenes throughout the entire show, is an important presence to have because she challenges Antony about his love for Kate. In fact, the amount that Daphne is included in this season is perfect. She's not overbearing, she doesn't take up too much time, she is there as a secondary character, and that's it. Daphne matters to this story. Benedict does not, and frankly, neither does Colin. Look, I understand that Benedict is a fan favorite because he's cute and dorky and fun to have around, but he is completely, painfully useless. Hi, it's me again. While we're on the subject of Benedict, there is something else we need to bring up. The big gay elephant in the room. Because yes, anyone who's seen Bridgerton is very aware that Benedict's character is pretty blatantly queer-coded. Especially in season 1, he exhibits some definite bisexual behavior. There's this great compilation on YouTube of Benedict being bi that I skimmed through, and the top comment on this video is, "I'm so happy that I'm not the only one who recognized him being a little gay. The first time he spoke with Henry, I was like, I can feel it. I know. Vibes." And like, yeah, of course. It's not an accident that he has moments where he admires both men and women. It's there for a reason. Like, you cannot tell me that this man is completely straight. And that goes for Eloise too. You're telling me this man hasn't thought about kissing dudes before? You're telling me Eloise isn't the least bit interested in women? My guy, you're hilarious. Now, I'm all for queer romances in the Regency era. Yeah, it's not very realistic, but have you seen Bridgerton? Nothing about this show is realistic. It exists as an escapist fantasy, so I don't think it's necessarily out of the question to include a queer romance in it. However, I do know that Benedict's romance in the book is with a woman, and that is perfectly fine. Benedict can be bi and end up with a woman. There is often a stigma around bisexuality, where if a bi person doesn't end up with a same-sex partner, they must not be actually queer, and that's just false. A bi person can end up with a partner of a different sex and still be bi. That's kind of what that means. Bi, two, dos, both. If Benedict ended up with a woman, he wouldn't be any less bi. But now the question arises, what is the best course of action here? Because a lot of the queer coding in Benedict's character was limited to season 1. Season 1 was kind of the only time that he showed any interest in men. In season 2, he didn't really give men a second glance, and this can be for a couple reasons. Number 1, there just weren't any men this season that caught Benedict's attention, or number 2, and I have a feeling that this is what ended up happening, is that the writers were being called out for queer baiting without having any intention of actually following through with the queer romance, and are now backtracking and trying to erase men's bisexuality, which is shitty. So the million-dollar question is, what will happen with Benedict's romantic season? There's 2 options here. One is that the writers could go balls to the wall and write a queer romance for Benedict, and the second option could be adapting Benedict's book romance with a woman named Sophie. I personally think it's going to be the second one. But the question that comes with the second option, wow, this is just questions inside of questions, isn't it? Is what is the motivation behind choosing a Benedict-Sophie romance? On one hand, it could be a healthy example of a queer bisexual man ending up in a relationship with a woman, which is perfectly fine, it does happen in real life, and it does not take away his queerness. On the other hand, it could be the perfect scapegoat for the writers to tease Benedict's queerness to keep queer audiences invested, and then not actually have to write a queer romance under the guise that he's still bisexual if he's with a woman. Like so many conversations in this world, this one is nuanced. I don't really know if there's a good solution to this because either way, people are going to be upset. If he does have a queer romance, people will be sad that we don't get Sophie, and be upset about the glossed over implications of having an openly queer romance in a time period that was historically hostile to queer people. If we do get Sophie, queer audiences may feel a little cheated that we didn't get the dream queer romance with this beloved character. I don't have the solution, and I'm really glad that I'm not a writer on Bridgerton because they really did write themselves into a corner here. This one's on you. Have fun figuring it out. Returning to the useless subplots, Bridgerton needs some serious direction in the following seasons. It's not impossible to have this many characters and plots in one story. It can and has been done successfully. The early seasons of Game of Thrones is like the gold standard for this. Game of Thrones is a giant story. There's an unbelievable amount of characters in this show that are all fascinating in their own rights. They have their own struggles, their own conflicts, and their own storylines, but none of them feel the way Benedict and I guess Colin do in Bridgerton. None of them feel like they got dropped into the story by accident and now they're just sort of here. What's so great about Game of Thrones is that it uses its huge cast of characters who are scattered all across the world to introduce and develop specific, different sections of the plot that come together to make one big story. Spoilers for season 1 of Game of Thrones, by the way. In season 1, the Starks, specifically Ned Stark, introduce to us the world and the politics that run it, as he uncovers the mysterious death of Jon Arryn, the previous Hand of the King, and the incestuous relationship between Cersei and Jaime Lannister that resulted in 3 illegitimate children who King Robert Baratheon thinks are his. Plot number 1. Way up north of the Wall, 3 men of the Night's Watch discover bodies massacred in a way that almost seems supernatural. When Jon Snow joins them, he digs deeper and learns that there may be something very sinister and not of this world threatening them, the Night King and his army of the dead. Plot number 2. And way across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen is married off to Drogo, Khal of his Dothraki, in exchange for her awful brother to get enough ships to take them across the sea so he can reclaim the Iron Throne which was stolen from them by Robert Baratheon. Plot number 3. That is a very simple breakdown of season 1 of Game of Thrones, but it gets the job done. All of those major plots are carried by specific characters that all have relations to one another, and the plot lines impact everyone. Ned Stark exposing the truth about Cersei's kids gets him killed and starts a war. The White Walkers cause Jon and friends pain and death, and as the show continues, grow into more and more of a problem until the very survival of humanity is threatened. Daenerys has her brother killed, then takes on his quest to take back the Iron Throne, which threatens the royalty in Westeros. It's all interconnected. It all matters. None of it can be cut. Bridgerton does not understand this. Bridgerton is a very simple show, and that's not a bad thing. I like simple. Simple can be good. But instead of embracing the simplicity of it and trying to tell one tight, strong story with minimal fluff, Bridgerton is trying to be more complicated than it needs to be, and it doesn't work. And no one is a better example of what I'm talking about than the Featheringtons. Oh my god. These people are the worst characters with the worst plotline in the show, hands down. There is no competition here. Sure, I was a little tired of Eloise and Penn, and sure, I was bored silly by Benedict and Colin, but the Featheringtons broke my soul. I am not exaggerating. I do not care about the Featheringtons. They are unbearable. So the Featheringtons are in a bit of a sticky situation after the man of the house is killed or something. Again, I didn't watch season 1. They don't have money, and they're waiting for the new Lord Featherington to show up so he can take care of their affairs. Upon his arrival, Portia tries to get her daughter Prudence to marry Lord Featherington, who is her cousin, might I add, going so far as to orchestrate a scandal between them so that he's forced to marry her, only to find out he's poor since his ruby mines are unsuccessful. This results in the two of them teaming up to scam other wealthy families by getting them to invest in the failed mines, starting their own sexual relationship on the side before being exposed for their scam by Colin Bridgerton, who threatens Featherington into returning the money or facing being exposed as a fraud to the public. This makes Portia turn on him, manipulating him into leaving the country and letting her keep a portion of the money to protect her and her daughters. If you're bored listening to me explain it, imagine watching it unfold over 8 episodes. This storyline makes me so irrationally mad, and I can't even fully explain why. It could be interesting in theory. The Featheringtons could be an example of what it's like to live in this world without money. I don't know if they had money before, but it's clear they had never had the kind of money the Bridgertons have, not by a long shot. The Featheringtons and their crimes could have been an example of the pressure to keep up appearances in high society, especially since the family consists of women. Appearances must be maintained in order for the girls, Prudence and Penelope, to find husbands and have a chance at changing the family's fortune for the better. But it's bogged down by the awful characters. The Featheringtons suck. They are terrible and annoying, and I hate them. And it's obvious they're supposed to be like that. Prudence is vapid and obnoxious, Portia is slimy and manipulative, and Lord Featherington manages to be both infuriating and boring, which makes him doubly infuriating. The only Featherington I can stand is Penn, and that's because she hangs out with the Bridgertons for most of the show. The Featheringtons are some of the most awful characters I have encountered in a hot minute. There is nothing to like about them. I get that all characters don't have to be likable. In fact, it would probably be boring if every single character in a show was the picture of perfection. Characters can definitely be unlikable. For example, Walter White in the final season of Breaking Bad is terrible. He's a murderer and a manipulator. He hurts the people around him. He thinks only of himself. He causes pain and devastation to his loved ones. He's an awful person in all senses of the word. Yet there wasn't a single moment that I did not want to watch him, because Walter White's unlikability is the result of meticulous planning from the writers. He is very deliberately written to be this way. We understand why he is the way he is, and it makes him interesting. He's unlikable, not unbearable. The Featheringtons are not unlikable. They are insufferable. They are not fun to watch. I was not intrigued by their awful personalities. Every time they came on screen, I wanted to chuck my laptop across the room. Nothing they did was even remotely watchable because it was them doing it. You can totally write characters that are not good people. Walter White is not a good person. Hell, Tommy Shelby is not a good person. But you never want to make your character so awful to endure that your audience doesn't even want to watch them. And I'm not talking about their actions here. I'm talking about personalities. I will watch a murderer on screen. I will watch someone who has committed serious crimes, and I'll do it gladly if the character is interesting. I will watch Walter White kidnap his own daughter. I will watch Tommy Shelby send his own family to the gallows. I will read about Kaz Brekker cutting someone's eye out. I will watch the Joker be psychotic, because the people behind those actions are infinitely fascinating. They are not annoying. They are not insufferable. They do not make me want to die the way the Featheringtons do. And the worst of them is none other than Lady Portia Featherington. Portia Featherington infuriates me the most because there was real potential with her character. You see, Portia Featherington reminds me of Cersei Lannister, and I know I sound insane, but please hear me out. Cersei Lannister is one of the best characters in Game of Thrones despite being a terrible person. Cersei is the queen of the Seven Kingdoms. She's very high up in Westeros royalty and wants to stay that way. Cersei is very good at playing the Game of Thrones. She might understand how to play it better than anyone else. After all, it is Cersei who delivers the iconic line.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or you die. There is no middle ground.
Cersei understands power, which, again, she shows us in a brilliant scene.
Knowledge is power.
Seize him. Cut his throat. Stop. I've changed my mind. Let him go. Step back 3 paces. Turn around. Close your eyes. Power is power.
Oh, I miss when Game of Thrones was good. Cersei is incredibly smart, often the smartest person in the room aside from Tyrion, and she uses her wits to gain power and protect herself and her family. Because more so than anything, Cersei's main desire in life is to protect her children. The way she does that is by climbing the ladder in often shady and gross ways to gain more and more power. When her children are put in danger, she starts to descend down even darker paths, becoming more desperate and more ruthless in her actions. She manipulates people, she has innocent people killed, she identifies the threat and eliminates it without hesitation. She plays the long game, and even when it seems like she's losing, she's really just biding her time to then hit with a strike even more devastating. And she does it all because her children mean everything to her. Without them, there is no point to living. Cersei is an incredible character, and Lena Headey is brilliant in this role. Seriously, this woman was born to play Cersei Lannister, and her outstanding performance is just another reason Cersei is as memorable as she is. Portia Featherington is similar to Cersei in the sense that she's a woman who is, for the most part, alone in this world. And on top of that, she only has daughters, which is obviously difficult in the Regency era. Portia's motivation throughout the season is to marry Prudence off to a man with money. That will protect not only Prudence, but herself and Pen as well. She starts scamming people with Lord Featherington, once again, for the money to set up her and her daughters. And when their scam is exposed, she jumps at the chance to keep the money for herself and her daughters. You could say that Portia acts in similar ways to Cersei, but the writing just never gets to that level. Cersei is incredibly smart. She's fascinating. She's terrifying. When Cersei is on screen, the scene is hers. Portia doesn't achieve nearly the same amount of presence. Portia isn't smart. She's not cunning. She's not sharp. She's not the smartest person in the room. She's not 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And her desire to protect her daughters is inconsistently written that by the time she kicks out Lord Featherington at the end of the season, it just feels forced. She's not awful because it serves her character. She's awful just because. What's frustrating is that with a few rewrites, and by turning her annoyance dial down significantly, Portia could have also been a fascinating character. But apparently that's too much to ask for, so this is what we get. Massive waste of potential. Okay, I think I've put off talking about the pacing for long enough, so I guess we can do it now. Bridgerton's pacing is a mess, and it sort of has to be a mess in order to fit in all the useless subplots I just talked about. It's an awful domino effect. Bridgerton shoots itself in the foot by doing one stupid thing that then leads to other aspects of the show being stupid, and then that leads to other aspects of the show being stupid. The pacing suffers the worst, because the show has to do the impossible job of weaving together a million different subplots, none of which matter. So much time is wasted in each episode. You know how you have a word count for an assignment, but you sort of blew through all your major points in like half of that, so you have to go back and add a whole bunch of stuff to fill out the word count? Yeah, that's what every single episode of Bridgerton feels like. And I think the worst example is episode 6. And I can already hear people yelling at me. Episode 6 is the most important episode of the season, while simultaneously being the most boring. I don't know how they manage it, but it's an accomplishment, truly. Episode 6 is all about Antony and Edwina's wedding and how it goes downhill. During the ceremony, Kate's bangle falls off her wrist, and Antony, like an idiot, goes to pick it up for her. Like, my guy, you're getting married! No, what are you doing? Edwina clearly sees the look of longing they share and runs out of the wedding, finally realizing that Antony and Kate have been in love with each other this whole time. Edwina blows up at Kate and sends her away, and the rest of the episode is spent with everyone wondering if Edwina will return to the wedding to marry Antony. Now, credit where credit is due. The first, 30 minutes of the episode is pretty solid. The beginning of the episode builds up the tension and anticipation of the wedding, successfully weaving in important character moments such as Kate gifting her mother's bangles to Edwina, and Edwina insisting that Kate wear them herself, and a heated exchange between Antony and Daphne, where Daphne warns Antony against the wedding since he's clearly hung up on Kate. And the wedding scene itself is fun. I grew up with Indian soap operas playing on the background of the TV of everything I do, so it was kind of funny to see something with the same vibes play out in a Western show. There's one thing specifically that I really enjoyed about the wedding. There's this shot of the curtains opening, and then the shot of Antony watching whoever it is walking down the aisle. And from the way it's shot and edited, you'd think it was Edwina. I mean, this shot is a staple in wedding scenes, when the bride comes down the aisle and the groom watches them in awe. But it's not Edwina. When we cut back, it's Kate walking down the aisle, and I thought it was a smart subversion and also a good representation of the desires of both these characters. And it leads directly into the tomfoolery that then breaks the entire union. It's fun to watch. The wedding is dramatic and messy and exciting. Yes, I said exciting. Because there is no way things are going to be okay after this. The bride has fled the wedding. Everyone saw that exchange between Antony and Kate. Both the Bridgertons and the Sharmas have their reputations at stake here. The literal queen is putting on this wedding, and it'll be really embarrassing if it were to be cancelled. The character relationships are seconds away from fracturing. There is so much at risk here. I was excited to see where it went. Yeah, that was my mistake. Because after the wedding, the episode decelerates to a pace so slow that it was difficult to even get through. I'm not kidding. Episode 6 went from being the most exciting episode of the season to being painstakingly, mind-numbingly pointless. And it's with the second half of the episode that you can really feel the whole trying to hit a word count thing I was talking about before. It's like they were trying to hit a preset runtime without any regard for the fact that the episode did not need to be this long. The rest of the episode is spent with people talking to each other. And let's be honest, that's not new for this show. Bridgerton is basically just characters talking to each other about little to nothing. But in this episode, it seems like everyone talks to everyone else, and they all talk about the exact same thing, whether or not Edwina will go back to the wedding. And it gets very boring very quickly. Like, there's a scene where Violet and Lady Danbury talk about the situation and start laughing at the absurdity of it. Neither of them know what to do, which is pretty rare, especially for Lady Danbury, and they can't help but laugh about it. And I kid you not, they laugh for 50 seconds. Almost a whole minute of this episode is spent on two women laughing about something that's not even that funny to begin with. Are you kidding me? There's another scene near the end of the episode when Edwina goes to the queen to tell her decision, but before she can do so, the king, who has Alzheimer's, bursts in very confused. He thinks it's his wedding day and that he's marrying Queen Charlotte. When guards try to take him back to his quarters, he gets upset, so Edwina steps up and calms him down enough that he returns to his quarters willingly. And once again, credit where credit is due. The scene is pretty sad. Alzheimer's and having people in your life dealing with Alzheimer's is sad. But this scene has absolutely no bearing on the plot. It doesn't matter. It's 2 minutes and 23 seconds of nothing, of filler. This is what really pissed me off, because it is so obviously just a way to stretch the episode out further. Because after the king leaves, so does the queen, and Edwina doesn't get the chance to tell her whether or not she'll marry Antony. It is quite literally only there to stop Edwina from giving her answer and padding out the episode's runtime. I hate it. It's stupid, it's unnecessary, it's infuriating. And even worse is that anyone older than 3 knows that Edwina is not going to marry Antony, because the main romance is between Antony and Kate, not Antony and Edwina. So everybody knows rules that Anthony and Kate can't be together if Anthony and Edwina get married, so they're obviously not going to get married. Look, romance stories are predictable. That's fine. It's a genre convention. You can't write a romance and not have the main couple end up together. It's required of the genre. I wouldn't have been nearly as pissed off about this episode if the fluff had just been cut out. At least 20 of the remaining 40 minutes either could have been cut out or rewritten so that it included actual interesting conflict. Oh my god, this show is like 8 hours long, and I'm willing to bet at least 3 of those hours are completely pointless. And again, it is doubly annoying that this show has 50 seconds of women laughing about nothing and over 2 minutes of a scene that means nothing in the grand scheme of things, while there are whole character arcs that are left unresolved. Oh, I think I need a Tylenol. I'm gonna give myself a headache. I know people really like episode 6, and if you do, that's fantastic. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm upset that I couldn't. You won in the end, because at least you had fun. I'm the one who spent days making myself angry for no reason by working on this video that like 10 people will watch, so just take your win and go. Okay, I think I'm done talking. I don't hate Bridgerton. I know it might be hard to believe due to the number of times this video devolved into yelling, but it's true. I don't hate this show. It definitely has its merits, and again, this kind of South Asian representation is groundbreaking and needed a lot more. But while I don't hate it, I also don't like it. There's just one too many things about this show that make me bust a blood vessel in my forehead. Having said that, I'll definitely be watching season 3, because as annoying as this show is, it's weirdly addicting, I'll give it that. Okay, someone please tell me they love me most ardently.